I've always been a huge fan of creepy things. Movies, books, art, any form of scary story is like a drug to me. My grandma used to tell us stories from her childhood in Eastern Europe. She always claimed to have a sixth sense. She was able to see the dead and even speak with them on occasion. As I grew older, those things stuck with me and took new forms. I would binge horror movies whenever I got the chance, and I read book after book on any genre of ghost story. But life has a way of interrupting your hobbies. Before long, I was a student during the day and a full-time worker at night. I don't mind the work or even the hours, but it left very little time for me to indulge in my niche fascination. I work overnight at a grocery store. It's easy, but it's also soul-wrenchingly monotonous and boring most of the time. My job consists of moving, opening, unpacking, and then breaking down cardboard boxes for 8 hours. I would complain about how boring it was pretty often until one of my coworkers asked me, "Why don't you just bring earbuds?" I was left speechless. I hadn't even considered that you could do that on the clock. I bought a $20 pair online the next day, and it arrived the following week. The sound wasn't great, and it was often drowned out by outside noises, but I didn't care. These things were the solution to my problem. I didn't need free time for the content I enjoyed if I could enjoy it while I was on the clock. I started with audiobooks. They were long, which was perfect for getting me through a shift. But eventually, I branched out a bit more. You'd be surprised how much horror content you can find on music apps. I went through horror podcasts, true crime analysis videos, and some old radio shows. A few of them were cheesy, sure, but they kept me awake and gave my brain something to chew on while my hands were on autopilot. Then, one night, I stumbled across something unique. A horror anthology series that was very well narrated. Each episode followed a new protagonist, and each one had their own voice. It was like listening to someone tell me their own personal story as it happened, complete with sound effects. I listened for the first time and was immediately hooked. The stories varied in length, usually from 30 minutes to an hour and a half, but there were so many episodes it would last me for weeks, maybe longer. I started to even look forward to shifts just to get back into the stories. The first story I remember being odd was titled "The Man in the Freezing Field." Nothing too special. It wasn't even really a supernatural story, just a man whose car broke down in the middle of nowhere during a snowstorm. He left the engine running to stay warm, but it died after a few hours. No call service, no coat, just a thin sweater and a dying flashlight. Surprisingly, this story turned my stomach more than usual. I'm comfortable with monsters, ghosts, curses, and stuff, but this story was just a graphic audio of someone narrating their own slow death. Crying, begging for help, shivering and shaking. Eventually, he just went quiet and the story ended. It was depressing. We had a walk-in freezer. Of course we did. Every grocery store has one, and I'd walked past that door 100 times before without a second thought. But now, I kept glancing at it. Halfway through my shift, I walked by the back aisle on my way to the crush boxes. That's when I heard it. A quiet sob. Just once. So soft, I very well could have imagined it. It could have been a box sliding against the slippery wall. Someone on the other side messing around. Anything. I knocked on the door just to be sure. When no answer came, I felt silly for entertaining the idea. I went about the rest of the day and forgot about it. Things went smoothly for a while. The story had rattled me, and so I took a break from the show for a week. I listened to my usual audiobooks, Lovecraft, Blackwood, M.R. James, a sort of comfort food for my nerves. But I couldn't resist. I was hooked, and it wasn't long before I queued up the next episode of the podcast. This one was called the break room. I was on my usual 2 a.m. lunch. The overnight lights buzzed and the vending machine compressor kicked on every few minutes. The tile floor always felt a little sticky no matter how many times it was mopped, and the plastic chains had that slight bend in the middle that made you wonder if they were one sit away from snapping. This place really spared expenses when it came to employees. When the narrator described his break room, I chuckled. Same flickering lights, same creaky vending machine, same sad microwave with a splatter-covered ceiling. It felt like a parody of my own life. I microwaved one of those soggy frozen burritos and sat in the usual plastic chair under the buzzing light. Same smell of disinfectant and instant noodles as always. The story started slow. Just a guy talking about the quiet, about how break rooms always feel lonelier at night. He mentioned the hum of the vending machine, the faded safety posters, the grease stain on the ceiling shaped like a dog's head. Then he said something that made me stop chewing. There's a moment about halfway through the night when you feel like you're the only person in the building. But you're wrong. There's always someone else in the break room first. I didn't understand what that meant at first. I glanced around. Just me, my burrito, and the flickering light above the fridge. Then clack. A single plastic fork slid off the table across from me and hit the floor. There hadn't been anyone else on break. I hadn't heard the chair shift or anything. Just the sound of the fork dropping like it had been set there, not like it had fallen from the edge. I stood up and looked around. Nothing. No one. But that chair across from me was slightly pulled out. Just slightly. I turned off the podcast and finished my break in silence. Things have only gotten worse since. I feel like I'm losing my mind. A story about a home invasion escalating to murder, the victim drowned in their own washing machine. It was accompanied in reality by clattering from the cleaning aisle and the faint smell of wild berry soap. A story about a woman who couldn't sleep because something kept brushing her hair at night. She locked every door, sealed every window, but still woke with knots in her hair and dirt on her pillow. As I stood in the break room mirror, adjusting my hat, a single black hair, not mine, fell onto my shoulder. A story about a kid who learned his reflection could blink on its own. Eventually, it started making faces he wasn't. When I went to the restroom that night, the mirror was fogged up even though the hot water hadn't been working. I understand it's dumb, but I started competing with them, trying to save the fictional victim anytime I could. A story about a kid getting sucked into a TV, I turned it off and covered the screen with a tarp. A story about a man who vanished after opening a strange cardboard box. I crushed every empty box twice that night, just in case. A story about a kid being stalked in their backyard. I turned every motion light on behind the building and stood watch at the back loading dock. Not once did I succeed. I felt like if I could just outsmart it, something would happen. It would stop. I needed to win this game, to solve this puzzle. It became such an obsession that I would review stories I had listened to before over and over, correcting myself and making note of things I could have done differently. Eventually, I came to the last episode. One last chance to win, to accomplish something. I don't know. I needed this. But I never expected this. I had been so focused on the victims of the story that I hadn't intended on saving myself. The title of the last episode was my name, first and last. I felt my heart sink when I saw it. I felt weak, clammy, as if I had a fever. And then, it's 1:41 a.m. I'm sitting in the break room. I froze. The voice wasn't mine this time, but it was close, just off enough to sound like a bad impersonation, like someone who had been studying me. There's a burrito in the microwave. I didn't notice yet that it stopped spinning. My head turned instinctively. The microwave was still humming, the numbers ticking down. But I could tell it wasn't working. The inside was cold. I blinked. My hands were numb. I wasn't breathing. I hear the door lock. I'm stuck. I stood up fast, heart pounding, then turned toward the break room door. It happened before I could reach it. Click. The lock slid shut. I lunged for the handle and twisted. Nothing. It didn't even rattle. The lock had never been that stiff before. I jiggled it again, harder this time. Still nothing. The voice in my earbuds continued, calm as ever. I tried the handle again, twice more. I stopped moving. My chest rose and fell in shallow, uneven breaths. I could feel sweat prickling at the back of my neck. There was a moment of silence, dead air, like the story was waiting for me to catch up, to decide what kind of character I wanted to be. I'm thinking of taking the earbuds out, but I won't. And I didn't, because I was afraid of what I might hear instead. I paced the break room back and forth, eyes fixed on the floor tiles like I might spot an exit I'd somehow missed. The earbuds hissed, and then I start pacing. I stopped. No, I needed it to be wrong. I stood still. I stopped pacing. My stomach turned. The voice was steady now, more confident. It didn't sound like an impersonation anymore, it sounded like me. I checked the window, even though I already know it doesn't open. My head turned toward the narrow break room window, unintentionally seeing that it was indeed stuck shut. The glass was fogged. Outside, only the empty parking lot, wet with recent rain, glowing under the orange floodlights. I tried the window latch. Locked. The podcast continued. I stare at my reflection. I don't recognize the eyes. Before I could fulfill this prediction, I squeezed my eyes shut and turned away. I let out one short laugh of triumph. I thought I had won our game of Simon Says. But the laugh caught in my throat. The podcast hadn't paused. I laugh, it said without emotion, but only for a second. My blood turned cold. I think I won. I think I'm in control again. I reached for the earbuds, still in my ears, still connected. The app was open. I don't realize yet the reflection is still watching. Against every instinct, I turned just to glance back toward the window. And I saw it. My reflection hadn't turned away with me. It was still staring, still facing forward. It no longer moved in sync with me. It smiled. The episode ended with one last line from the voice that sounded so much like me. I don't realize yet that I'm almost out of time. I haven't realized. It's only learning. Soon, it will hollow me like bark and climb inside my skin. And climb inside my skin. As it spoke, my reflection held up one of its hands, stretching out its fingers as if showing them to me. I crushed my earphones, snapped my phone in half, and threw them into the trash compactor. As soon as I did, I heard the lock click again. Relief flooded me. Whatever supernatural nightmare I was a part of had ended when I destroyed my phone. I didn't wait for my shift to end. I went home and slept, beyond relieved that it was over. I had survived that night. It's always been that way. It always ends when I go home. It's never left the store with me. But when I looked into the mirror this morning, my reflection was smiling at me. It hadn't moved since last night. Same posture, same stare. There was just one exception. It held up 4 fingers. Thank you so much for making it to the end of this video. A quick shout out to my patrons, Old Penguin, Rinku Star, Melissa Perez, Icy Narrates, Seven Cities Journalist, Cupcake Hips, Eric Cifuentes, Alonso, Austin My Love, Ellie Hutmeyer, Jesse Hartley, Lawrence Wallen, Mr. Sankofa, and William Hartley. I always try to link a different charity in the description, so go ahead and check that out. I'm also going to start having more things on my Patreon soon, so keep your eyes peeled. And as always, I'd love to know how I can be praying for you, so go ahead and drop a comment and let me know how I can do that. Thank you so much, and I hope to see you in the next video.